If the Dallas Cowboys can only extend one positional player, should they choose Micah Parsons or CeeDee Lamb? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. On today's show, we are answering your Twitter questions, and we've got some really good ones about potential breakout candidates. Would it be better if Rico Dowdle or Jalen Tolbert broke out? We'll get to all that and more. But this first question is a really good one from Evan. He wants to know, Landon, if the Cowboys can only sign one positional player to a long-term deal, should it be CeeDee Lamb or Micah Parsons?
Well, first of all, let's just to, because I know Cowboys fans palm sweat just thinking about this question. You don't have to choose between the two of them. You can pick. You can have both of them. So don't be fretting about that. But for the questioner's question, I tend to think that this is again a real Sophie's choice in this situation. I think I would probably take CeeDee. I think the wide receiver position is one that is becoming more and more important as time is going on. As the passing game continues to become an important aspect of offense, and offense being the most important of the two aspects. I also think that wide receiver is a position in which you can perform at a high level if you're one of the better players for a really long time. And I think that as much as Micah Parsons is an incredible freak of nature, dominant player, his skill set is largely based on his incredible unmatched athleticism and his explosion. And I don't know that that's always going to last forever and ever. So I tend to think that, you're probably safe signing either one of these two players to a long-term extension, because I don't know that either one of them are going to be reaching their pinnacle and then coming down on the backside of that mountain, during the length of this contract. But if the idea is that I'm hitching my wagon to one of these two players for the long term, I think it's probably CeeDee, even though I think Micah may be the more rare player for his position.
I tend to agree with you. But I also will admit, I think a pass rusher is harder. An elite pass rusher, I think, is harder to find than an elite receiver.
That's fair.
And I think in general, when it comes to like positional value, I think edge rusher is probably higher than wide receiver. But I think in this case, I mean, CeeDee Lamb just works in any scenario you talk about, right? Like if the Cowboys decide to bring back Dak Prescott, great. Now you have Dak and CeeDee for the next 4 or 5 years. That's one of the best quarterback wide receiver pairings in the league. If you decide to move on from Dak and you have a rookie quarterback, it'd be really nice to have a star wide receiver for him to throw to early on. He's also only 25. This will be his age 25 season. And you're still talking about 5 full seasons of CeeDee Lamb before he turns 30. And what's incredible about CeeDee Lamb is that he just keeps getting better and better every year. And these are some of the advanced numbers, courtesy of Pro Football Focus, not just the raw counting stats, but 82nd percentile receiving grade, 93rd percentile single coverage grade, 96th percentile yards per route run, 78th percentile drop rate, 67th percentile yards after the catch per reception. He just keeps getting better and better and better. And I think he's the type of player that you want to build around. So as much as I think Micah is a freak and one of the best players that the Cowboys have had on defense in a long time, I would choose CeeDee.
It's funny how much this season we've kind of examined these two players, obviously, and how similar they are, right? In the sense that they are who, look, I mean, obviously the offense is built around Dak, but outside of that, they are the two players in which their respective groups are completely centered around, right? Like CeeDee is the guy who's getting the lion's share of targets. He's the person that is the main focus of the offense. And obviously Micah is the one that the defense is kind of built around, right? So, or I guess will be built around, right? So it is a really tough question, and I think that we've all been kind of examining the comparison of these two players throughout the season, throughout the offseason because of the contract situations. And again, I'm glad that we don't have to make this decision because it is not a fun one. But yeah, I do think that in this specific scenario, even though, I mean, I think you could make an argument that both of them are on their way to being potential Hall of Fame players. I think that if given a choice, because of who CeeDee Lamb is, and because of what a wide receiver who can eat that many targets efficiently and produce high level is worth to an offense, I probably tip the scales just slightly to CeeDee.
Now, how would you feel about the argument? Well, the one of the reasons why you should take CeeDee over Micah is because he's less of a distraction. Not saying that Micah is a distraction, but there seems to be a little bit more noise there. I mean, some of that has just come out this offseason, whether it's maybe Micah not loving some of the classroom work or some of the comments. How do you feel about that argument?
I think it's an argument, and I think it's a point to be made. I just don't know that it actually moves the needle either way. I think, look, I mean, we've all heard this kind of whisper stuff, but, I mean, it hasn't prevented him from being a dominant player at any point during his career, or him being the kind of stir that stirs the defense's drink. So, I think it factors in for sure. But I also think you can make the argument that CeeDee is an odd bird for a wide receiver, right? He's not the kind of Justin Jefferson tweeting cryptic threats towards teammates.
Not yet.
Coaches,
the receivers always get there at some point. I'm sure we'll get there.
Maybe that's true, and maybe we'll get some kind of cryptic 12 emoji text from CeeDee at some point about. He likes candles, so it'd probably be something about a Yankee candle that he got that he didn't like or something. So, I don't know. I tend to think that stuff factors in, and we talk about it because it's the off season and it's drama and it's great to talk about. But I think on the field, in the reality, it's neither one of those guys has anything about their personality that is moving the needle in a negative way enough to stop me from wanting them desperately on my team.
Yeah, I would be shocked if the Cowboys don't extend both of these players within the next 15-ish months or so. But if it really came down to these two, I probably would lean CeeDee just because of the importance of the offense, because there's a lot of uncertainty at quarterback. Having a bona fide number one receiver that can win on the outside and in the slot, not just in the slot, Packer fans, but also on the outside is something nice to have. Yes, I got my little shot in at Packer fans. So, all right, let's talk about a potential breakout star that we are all in for the 2024 season. We will get to that next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. We absolutely love FanDuel here on the Locked On Cowboys podcast. And it's summertime, and that means baseball, the NBA Finals, and so much more. And you can bet it all on FanDuel right now. New customers can get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Yes, that's $200 that you can use to bet on everything from the Finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park. Listen, Mavs fans, I know that you're depressed and sad right now, but they're only plus 660 to win the NBA Finals. Now we're going back to Dallas. I expect them to take care of business and get this to be 2-2 going back to Boston in Game 5. I also really like Jaylen Brown to win Finals MVP at plus 185. He's outperformed Jason Tatum in each of the first two games. I think that's a really sneaky good bet. So go visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn and add a big win to your summer bucket list with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Are you having to turn down the volume because of all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that unnecessary screaming. Locked On Sports today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Landon, this next question comes from Connor. He wants to know, who are you all in on this year? Can be either on either side of the ball.
I'm going to flip this for you real quick. I want to hear yours first because mine is actually a cheat a little bit, and I'm going to let you get away with it, and so we can get in under the rules before I break the rules.
Yeah, that's fine. It's Jake Ferguson. I think Jake Ferguson is poised to have a monster season. Remember, at this time last year, we weren't even sure who was going to be the starting tight end. The Cowboys drafted Luke Schoonmaker in round 2. There was some Peyton Hendershot buzz. We are assuming that Jake Ferguson was going to take a leap or make a leap, and he did. I thought Ferguson was really good, especially down the stretch last year. And even in the playoff game, I know that was a blowout, but he scored 3 touchdowns against the Packers. If you're watching with us on YouTube right now, you can see some of the advanced stuff from PFF. 86th percentile receiving grade, 88th percentile receiving zone grade, 76th percentile yards per route run, 57th percentile contested catch rate, and 80th percentile yards after the catch. He was really good last year, and I think there's a lot of room for him to improve as a blocker. I think he can get better in the routes that he can run. I think there was too many times last year where the ball hit his hands and he got open and Dak delivered a strike and he just wasn't able to haul it in. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities that he's a 900-yard receiver with double-digit touchdowns.
No. I think you said it. I think by this time last year, we were talking about, man, Jake Ferguson had a really great season. I'd like for him to take a step, and then hopefully between him and Schoonmaker, we could, cobble together some good tight end 1 numbers. And instead, what happened is that Schoonmaker had his issues that obviously plagued him all season, and Ferguson didn't take a step; he took a leap, like you said, and became a different player, and now has kind of put himself in the echelon of within striking distance of that top 3 of tight ends in football with a couple other young tight ends. So. I expect him to kind of, after the leap he took, take another step forward. I would like to see him continue to work and get better on the contested catch stuff like we just saw. I think he was in the 57th percentile. If he could get that up, I think that adds 2 or 3 more touchdowns last season, probably 75 to 100 more yards just by coming down with some of those catches that got onto his hands that he wasn't able to bring down. So, I have big hopes for Fergie. Okay, so my all in is on the right side of the offensive line. I think that Zach Martin has dealt with a knee situation by the back half of last year. Steele was coming off of his knee situation from the previous year, still recovering from that ACL injury, rushed to make it back and was able to play. I'm pretty sure all 17 games last year off of an ACL injury, which is incredibly impressive, but his play was not incredibly impressive. It definitely wasn't what, especially early, was not what we had expected from Terrence Steele. And late was definitely not what we have come to expect from Zach Martin. I think both of these guys have had a fully healthy offseason again, and I expect them both to kind of revert to form to what we saw closer to the 2022 season, where they were one of the most dominant pairs of offensive linemen next to each other, especially in the run game in all of the NFL. And this new commitment back into the more of the run game, I think they're going to rely heavily on those two on the right side as Tyler Guyton kind of gets his footing, as Cooper Beebe or whoever the starting center is kind of works his way into that. I think a healthy Zach Martin getting through the offseason and a healthy Terrence Steele getting through an offseason hopefully will return them back to what we had seen previously, which again I think can be a main focal point of this offense, running to that right side like it was in the 2022 season. And the Cowboys had a ton of success and frankly built most of their run game running behind those two dominant blockers.
I'll also say the Cowboys are going to need those guys to really step up their pass protection as well, because you look at some of the pass rushers they have to play this year. They're playing the AFC North, which has Trey Hendrickson, Myles Garrett, who lines up all over, TJ Watt, who's on that right side that Terrence Steele will be going up against. I mean, it's going to be really tough for Terrence Steele. They're going to have him play better. They need Zach Martin to stay healthy. But I'm with you. Like, as long as those guys can stay healthy, it would be a shock if their play wasn't dramatically better than what it was last year, because I thought at times last year that right side was their biggest Achilles heel.
Yeah. I mean, the problem was that they had gotten a little bit worse in pass protection than they were previous season, and they were so much worse in the run game just because they weren't able to sustain blocks. They just didn't seem to have the power that they had previously. I expect a year away from that, both of those situations to help both of those players immensely, and them kind of returning back to form.
One other, it's not even a name, a position group that I feel really good about, which we're actually going to touch on a little bit in the next segment. But if I had to say a positional group that I'm kind of all in on, it's the receivers. Like, I know there's a lot of people out there, and maybe it's mostly the fantasy football community, that's really nervous about the Cowboys pass catchers this year. I'm not. I'm really not. When you have CeeDee Lamb, first of all, he's just going to gobble up so much of the volume in the passing game that everybody else just has to fill a role. And I feel good about the rest of the receivers. I think Brandon Cooks looked really good in the second half of the year. I'm pretty optimistic about Jalen Tolbert. We'll get to that in a little bit.
Yeah.
I thought Kevontae Turpin was better in year 2 as a receiver. We saw, Jalen Brooks play well down the stretch. I feel good that even with the wide receivers outside of CeeDee Lamb, that you're going to get good enough production to get where you want to go.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think, look, I think a lot of people are wringing their hands over where this offense is going to be, and all they lost was Michael Gallup. It's like, do you think
who was getting phased out of the offense prior to the playoff game?
Yeah, it's like, do you think the Cowboys can't, recreate that talent? I mean, they can. And now look, obviously the Pollard situation, as well. He had caught a ton of catches as well. I just think that the Cowboys have a large number of guys that they would like to try to get the football to, that they can distribute these catches to. We keep hearing, you want to talk about a drumbeat. I don't know if it's a drumbeat of positive play, but a drumbeat of schematic news that we keep hearing over and over again is that Turpin is going to be more involved in this offense than he was last year, right? So Turpin will get a portion of these. Obviously, Tolbert is the person who is the most direct, likely person to eat up those Gallup targets. You mentioned it. I mean, there's another guy who I almost threw in as my all-in player, Hunter Lipke. They're going to play more fullback this year. They're going to throw the ball to the fullback.
Surprising thing of all time.
It's going to happen. And then you look, they have other guys too. I mean, we talked about Cropper and they brought in Corey Crooms, and I don't know if these guys are going to necessarily make the roster, but the point is that they have guys that they are excited to see and think that they have the opportunity to kind of do something more, especially in that Jalen Brooks, Jalen Tolbert, Kevontae Turpin area, and really Ryan Flournoy too. I mean, you bring him in, like, he's even had a little bit of a drumbeat of positivity through OTAs. I think between those 4 guys, if you can find 2 guys that you feel like can be let's take Tolbert out of that. Between Brooks, Turpin, Flournoy, and then maybe even like someone like David Durden or Jalen Cropper, right? If you could find 2 guys out of that group of 4 that I just named who can make the roster and, give you 3 targets a game, 2 or 3 targets a game, I think that's, you're going to get something out of that and be able to replace a little bit. And that's also to kind of just eat into what we were just saying. The other thing is that Ferguson's going to get better, and Lamb is going to get better. So I think, and I honestly think someone like Cooks is going to be better than he was last year, because a year with Dak is going to help him. So I do think that there is opportunities for this offense to be better than it was before. Just this is weird to say, despite missing Michael Gallup, I guess it's really Pollard that I think that the Cowboys need to worry about. And that's why we've discussed, so much about the running back position this offseason.
Let's continue to talk about the running back situation, because what would be a better breakout scenario? Rico Dowdle grabbing the RB1 job, or Jalen Tolbert breaking out? We will get to that next. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Everydayers. On tomorrow's show, we're going to talk about a couple of UFL players that the Cowboys are working out, I believe today, this afternoon, including 2 former first-round picks at cornerback. What could that mean for the Cowboys? Make sure you guys tune in for that. But let's finish the show with a question from a longtime listener, Goran. He wants to know which best-case scenario breakout seems more likely and would be better for the Cowboys. Is it Rico Dowdle emerging as the RB1 and having a season worthy of being a lead back, or Jalen Tolbert leaping over Brandon Cooks and solidifying himself as the full-time wide receiver 2?
This is an interesting one, because I think Dowdle is the one that I feel like would be best for the team, right? Because there's so much.
Because if you have CeeDee and Jake Ferguson, and then you have a competent running back, and he's maybe not producing at the level that Tony Pollard did, but close to that,
yeah,
you feel pretty good about your offense being a top 5 offense again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, having said that, like, that to me seems like a less surprising scenario than, again, the specifics matter here. Jalen Tolbert taking the wide receiver 2 position, like that, I feel like Tolbert's got a ways to go there, right? Like I still really,
that's a bigger leap, I think, right?
That's what I guess what I'm getting at, is that even though I feel like Rico's taking the brass ring at running back is the better scenario as far as breakout situations for the Cowboys, I think Tolbert taking wide receiver 2 would be the bigger leap from where he is currently. So that also would not be a very bad scenario at all. So I do think that again, the particulars matter here, sort of like the Micah versus CeeDee situation. I feel like in a vacuum, I might answer one way, but with the particulars involved with the Cowboys, I'm answering this way. And I think that this is a team that, is really a Pro Bowl level producing running back away from being right back into a top 2, top 3 offense in this league. So I think the answer is, for me, is Rico. But again, I think it would be an incredible jump to witness to see Jalen Tolbert take that wide receiver 2 job from Cooks.
The thing is, we've seen Rico Dowdle perform well. Last year when he was on the field, the numbers are very good. 53rd percentile rushing grade, 67th percentile yards after contact per attempt, 75th percentile receiving grade, 98th percentile fumble rate. Like, he performed well when he was on the field. Now it's about consistency and being able to stay on the field and handle that big of a workload. We'll see if he can do that. The only reason why I would hesitate to put the Rico one over Tolbert is because, let's say Tolbert does break out, and it's not because of a Brandon Cooks injury or a CeeDee Lamb injury or anything like that.
He earns it.
Right. And he's like a 900-yard receiver with 6 touchdowns. And now you're talking about 3 legitimate weapons at wide receiver and a tight end that, I earlier in the show called kind of my breakout all-in guy. Now we're talking about a passing game that is diversified and it has some depth. And that's how, they could do a lot of damage that way, even if they only had an average running game. I think you're right, though. Like, if the Cowboys can find a running back that can step up and produce at a really high level, that's what's going to make them more balanced. But long-term, man, Tolbert taking that number 2 receiver job would be a lot of fun. Yeah, that's the other thing is, like, Rico's on a 1-year deal, right? Yeah. And if he does break out, then you're in a pickle again next offseason.
Similar situation.
Right, but if Tolbert breaks out, okay, now you've got another year of Tolbert. You've got CeeDee Lamb locked up, assuming they get a contract done. They can let Brandon Cooks go. I don't know. This one's tough.
I would counter that with saying that I think a Rico Dowdle breakout season includes a lot of receiving yards too. like
Probably.
includes a pretty healthy dose of targets. I mean, Pollard, I'm pretty sure, was the third or fourth most targeted player in the passing game last year. So I think that, a breakout there could be beneficial to the passing game as well. But I think you bring up a good point. There is a long-term versus short-term situation here, right? Like,
well, okay, hold on. I'm going to change my answer. If Rico Dowdle has a breakout season, it probably means the offensive line's performing well.
That's true.
It probably means that they stayed healthy, or Tyler Guyton was much better than the Cowboys anticipated, and they got good center play. That's probably what happened. So I'm gonna change my answer. I'm going back to Rico having a breakout year.
Yeah, I think. Well, I mean, all right. Now I'm changing my answer. I'm going to Tolbert. No, I think obviously both are great. Anybody breaking out and being better is a good situation for the Cowboys. I think we are all just a little bit gun shy at the running back position right now because we don't have as solid an answer there. Correct. We have good answers at the wide receiver position. There's some stuff to kind of suss out at the bottom of the depth chart. But at the running back position, we have a lot of names, but we don't have a lot of answers. And I think that's why we would jump at the opportunity to get a guy to kind of be the person that we can feel reliably happy about at running back, because at least it would be an answer. And at wide receiver, we feel like we have satisfactory answers as long as CeeDee Lamb is in the room.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Again, every day is on tomorrow's show. We're going to touch on some of the UFL workout news that the Cowboys are looking into, some defensive backs and some defensive players. So make sure you tune into that. We'll hit on all the latest Cowboys news. Go download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Go follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosier. And we will see you right back here tomorrow.